What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here, back again, continuing our college football series. And today, per request from Twitter, we are talking Notre Dame football. If you have a request, you can either leave it below in the comments, reach out on Twitter. We'll make sure to get to those, just compiling a list right now. It is April 15th. The spring portal window is about to open, so we do have to at least consider these rosters. Probably will change a little bit. Teams like Notre Dame, like Clemson, they're going to change a little less than some others, but it's at least worth noting. If you want to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment or hit the thumbs up button. All that helps a ton as well. So thank you for anyone who has helped with the YouTube algorithm things. It is much appreciated. But we have Notre Dame on deck. Let's dive right in and start with an overview of what happened for this team last year. Here are the 2024 efficiency metrics. Of course, Notre Dame went to the national championship game and ended up losing, but a phenomenal season after a lot of people probably wrote them off, considering they lost to Northern Illinois and they had a slew of injuries across the team. Heading into the season, multiple offensive linemen went down, projected starters. They were able to mostly paper over that. Some of their weaknesses actually were on the offensive line. They came in 65th in pass blocking. They had some problems at the tackle position especially, but still a pretty good unit considering their losses. And on defense, you had a couple defensive tackle injuries. Riley Mills, Howard Cross, they come in 43rd there in run D. The low receiving number at 54, that's just a failure to develop talent. This has been a big problem for Notre Dame consistently over the last couple of years. And then shockingly, they ended up second in coverage considering they had a lot of secondary injuries, including Ben Morrison. But an awesome season for them. Marcus Freeman has really ascended after he took over this team in 2022, at least full time. He has a 33-10 record. Of course, the national championship berth. He is a defensive guy himself, previously coordinated the Notre Dame defense in Cincinnati before that. They move into year two with Mike Denbrock as OC. He comes from LSU, where he had held the same position and developed a ton of elite players, especially at the QB position, the wide receiver position. So hopefully we can see some development year over year with those position groups in Notre Dame. They're historically some troublesome positions for the team. Defensive coordinator, they had to hire Chris Ash. Al Golden leaves the program. He takes over the same position in the NFL with the Cincinnati Bengals. Ash has been kind of away from the spotlight for a while. This guy has former head coaching experience with Rutgers. He is a well-tenured defensive coordinator, but we have to go pretty far back to look at the last defenses he handled, at least entirely: Wisconsin, Arkansas, and Ohio State. But that was between 2011 and 2015. I was in college, so it was a while ago. Those are at least questions worth noting. As far as some other high-level Notre Dame stuff, here are their recruiting rankings and retention in the little pivot tables. This is a good recruiting team, not great, not quite on par with some of the SEC teams, but we have the 12th overall class this year, 9th in 2024, 12th in 2023. And as you can see, almost every single player is still on that team. We'll see how much they can withstand in the portal. But so far, their retention has been awesome. They have lost a couple guys, but they're mostly from lower classes, 2022 class, players that didn't crack the field anyway. So Notre Dame is in a good spot. They don't recruit quite as well as the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Texases, but their retention is a little bit better. Not by much, but it is a little bit better. And not much in the portal for them. They've been 38, 40, and 54 over the last 3 years. Just not something they are using with the same frequency as some other teams, and they don't have to. But let's get to our little tool we made behind the glass. Basically what you see on the screen: offensive depth chart, defensive depth chart. These are the projected two deeps. You have transfers in yellow, injured players in the pinkish red, most of them just out for the spring. I'll note where it's more serious. Snaps the last 2 years. And then we have our positional value chart. That is a metric that starts with your recruiting ranking, and then the more you've played, the more it weights on-field metrics per position to hopefully get a better grasp of how good these players actually are. That is the actual goal with this exercise. If you have any qualms, let me know, but let's dive right in. The quarterback position for Notre Dame is the first pivot point. They're moving on to a new starter after Riley Leonard departs. Riley Leonard was surprisingly the 22nd most efficient quarterback in college football last year among QBs that had at least 300 dropbacks. That factors in rushing. That is not just pure passing. And a lot of what Riley Leonard did was on the ground. Now you have to move to some four-star. We are not sure who it's going to be yet. I tentatively listed CJ Carr up at the top with how much hype he's been getting. He's the redshirt freshman, former four-star, been absolutely dominating this spring. In the spring game, he went 14 of 19 for 170 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. It is not clearly his job, though. We still have Steve Angeli. He is the player that stepped up for Riley Leonard against Penn State when he went down briefly with an injury, led an awesome drive, went 6 of 7 for 44 yards against Penn State. And then through his career, he has a 72.5% completion, 9.7 yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns, 1 interception, a little mobility, not as much, but all that mainly came against backups when Notre Dame was blowing out teams. Just the Penn State drive, really, where we got a glimpse of what things could be with him. They also have Kenny Minchey. He's on the roster, only 3 career pass attempts, but a former four-star. He's a sophomore. He looks like the best runner. He rushed for a touchdown in the spring game. And if that's not enough, they have an incoming four-star, Blake Herbert. I'm not sure Notre Dame can hang on to all 4 of these QBs. They're not proven. But, I mean, we're talking 4 stars across the board, 4 of them. If someone fails, you have someone else to step up. It would be shocking if Notre Dame did not hit on any of them and they had 4 busts on the roster. So I think we have to start with Notre Dame is probably going to be pretty decent at quarterback. And luckily, with Denbrock as OC, we've seen Notre Dame and LSU going back a few years with pass-heavy offenses. We just saw Denbrock run a run-heavy offense where Riley Leonard was at times the focal point of the run game. If they need to slam the ball on the ground, they will do that. Running back. One of the better running back rooms in the country. It's hard to argue against that, and it starts with Jeremiah Love at the top. He is now finally entering his junior year. He averaged 6.9 yards per carry, rushed for over 1,100 yards, caught another 28 passes, and that was all despite a late-season ankle injury, and rarely seeing the lion's share of the workload for a couple of reasons. When Notre Dame would blow out teams, they would ease off him, and then they have players like Jadarian Price behind him. It's a deep unit. Love is 6 feet, 212 pounds, pretty good size. Some of the best athleticism in the country when you watch his tape. See hurdles, crazy breakaway runs. He had over 6 of those. Over 15 plus. Elite speed with him. He's a great place to start. And then Jadarian Price, 5'11", 202 pounds. He rushed 120 times, 6.2 yards per carry, 4 catches. More of an early down back, but still a fantastic compliment to Love. And then on third downs, we saw last year's freshman, Aeneas Williams, come in, carry 34 times, but catch 18 passes. He also averaged 6.4 yards per carry. He's more of a third down back, but someone that did handle more work as the season went on. The roster also has Keydron Young, former four-star. They bring in freshman four-star Nolan James. People forget Jybron Payne tore his ACL last year. He was a factor in 2023. This unit is loaded. Wide receiver, maybe not so much. This is at least up in the air because of Notre Dame's historical ineptitude developing the position. You have to go kind of back to like Equinemius St. Brown and some of those guys to find a good receiver that was like drafted. I guess Chase Claypool maybe is probably the most recent one, but Miles Boykin. It's not been pretty though. And when you look at this unit, they do lose some players, but none of them are concerns. Bo Collins, Chris Mitchell, Jaden Thomas. Okay, let them go. Let's play some depth, some highly recruited freshmen, sophomores, and see what we've got. They do have a couple returners, which I think are a good place to start and keep your floor high. Jaden Greathouse, a former four-star, he actually emerged later down the season, finished with 592 yards and 42 catches. He was the most efficient receiver on the team on a yards per route basis. He's 6'1", 210 pounds. Played a lot in the slot at that size, which is interesting. They also returned Jordan Faison, former lacrosse player who caught 30 balls for 356 yards. A smaller receiver, but a boundary receiver, 5'10", 184. Missed 3 games with an ankle injury, but he was the second most efficient receiver. Comes from a weird recruiting background because of the lacrosse stuff, but he showed pretty efficient play when he was healthy last year. So you have those two. Then they go to the portal. They bring in Malachi Fields from Virginia. He's not with the team yet, arrives this summer, but 6'4", 220 pounds, caught 55 balls for 808 yards and 5 scores in a pretty bad Virginia offense. And then they bring in Will Pauling from Wisconsin. Pauling is already on campus. He had a weird season last year because of injury, but he's 5'10", 190 pounds, basically a slot receiver only. But he did have an awesome 2023 with Wisconsin. 73 catches, 834 yards there, previously played with Cincinnati. So those four give you a pretty good foundation. I immediately think it's better than last year's group. I would like to see what 4-stars on the team like Micah Gilbert, Scrap Richardson, Cam Williams, Logan Saldate, and Elijah Burris offer. That's 5 guys we didn't talk about yet that probably aren't in the top 4. But the last thing I'll say in the receivers, that it's still concerning to me that 3-star receivers like KK Smith, lacrosse players like Jordan Faison are still beating out these 4-stars. Either you're missing in your recruiting evaluations or you have a lack of development at the position. And I don't know what the answer is, but it's at least a problem because we're going on like a 5-year stretch now. Need to see some of these players actually step up. And maybe what we saw from Great House last year was a little bit of what could be to come. Tight end, this is a complete question mark. They lose Mitchell Evans. I guess, fortunately for this position room in 2025, Evans was coming off the injury last year, and they babied him along so much that like he was playing 50% of the snaps through most of the year. Because of that, Eli Raridon played nearly 400 snaps. Now, he didn't exactly play well, but he's like a weird body type. He's 6'7", 251 pounds, blocked most of the time, only caught 11 balls. And that's the thing. Most of these tight ends are blockers. Cooper Flanagan looks like a blocker. Spent most of his time doing that last year, 6'6", 250 pounds. He played 262 snaps, but now he's out for the spring, so he's not being able to develop. They also have Kevin Bauman, who's continually injured as well. 6'5", 260 pounds. All these guys are blockers. They do bring in James Flanagan, a 4-star, actually from Wisconsin, as a freshman. And they bring in Arkansas transfer Ty Washington, who's never done anything in multiple seasons there. The staff has praised some lower recruits in Jack Larson and Justin Fisher. What this says to me is basically you have a pretty good blocking unit, I think, largely because the profile of these guys, we're talking huge tight ends, who's going to catch your passes? Maybe they don't need it. Maybe they can just rely on their receivers. I'm not sure, but it's a largely unproven unit for the most part. Catching the ball, blocking, you've got a little bit more of a pedigree with this unit. Offensive line. This should be a solid unit. They returned 3 of their top 6 snap getters, but because of injuries, a lot of guys had to play last year. So you'll see a couple of players that maybe didn't have full-time roles, but they started a game here or there. Jagasaw is a good example of that, but more on that in a second. Let's go left to right. At left tackle, former 4-star Anthony Knapp is back after he played 843 snaps last year. And the thing about both of these tackles that we'll talk about, neither of them were expected to play, at least not this level of play. So Knapp, you look at his game, elite run blocker. And basically everyone that's going to step on the field for Notre Dame is, even the players that are new. That's how you get such a good run blocking unit from last year. The problem with Knapp was pass blocking, and he was well below average there. He allowed a team-high 31 pressures. Guarding the blind side is going to be a problem. We'll see if he can develop. I think there's still a lot of hope because he was so young, press into action when it wasn't expected. At least you have solid run blocking to fall on. If he can even improve to like 24 quarterback pressures instead of 31, that would be a huge step in the right direction for him. Left guard, Billy Schroth, he played 700 snaps last year. He's the exact opposite, graded out far better in the pass game compared to the run game. Only 8 pressures allowed from Billy Schroth. 4-star, solid player at left guard. Center, I think, is Ashton Craig. It's hard to say because he's been out this spring, but he's filled in a couple times over the years, 159 snaps last year, 238 the year prior. Without him, 4-star Sullivan Absher has been playing center in the spring, which is weird because he played 90 snaps last year, and he literally took a snap at every offensive line position except center. Apparently, he's the most versatile offensive lineman on the team. But that's the only real question you have. Right guard looks like it's going to be Charles Jagasaw. He played a little bit of left tackle and right guard last year. Only managed 2 games because of a preseason injury, but he was a projected starter. His injury allowed guys like Anthony Knapp to play. Now you have the luxury of 2 guys with some left tackle experience. Gajewski can play inside and out, former 4-star, so you're not worried there. And then last up, Emil Wagner at right tackle, 973 snaps, strong across the board, elite run blocker, above average pass blocker, giving you a solid foundation. And if that's not enough, it's basically 4 stars across the board outside of Craig at center, and Absher would fill that position if he's out. Here's who you have on the roster of elite recruiting pedigree. 5-star freshman Will Black comes in. He's more of a tackle. Former 4-stars, Joe Otting, Gary Lambert, Cam Herron, Matty Augustine, Styles Prescott, Peter Jones, Devon Houston, some of those incumbents from a year or two ago. There's so many offensive linemen of elite play on this team, and this is a strength of Notre Dame over the years. They recruit offensive linemen very well. They continually put out NFL players at the position, so guys want to go here. It's an easy recruitment for this position, and there's no surprise that Notre Dame is elite on the offensive line again this year. And honestly, what they did last year with their losses could have been a blip on the radar. Now you move more to the foundation of having all these guys healthy. We'll see how it plays out. Defensively, a lot of these positions suffered the same attrition last year. I can't really even begin to emphasize how much of a miracle it was that Notre Dame was able to get this play out of youth, considering how hurt they were. The best player on this unit was probably Jordan Botello. He played 3 games. Now he's back. He was an elite player in those 3 games, was a starter in 2023, 428 snaps. So you immediately start with him. He's at least going to play a role, and he could just immediately be your best pass rusher. And then because of that, you had so many guys get snaps. Former 4-star, junior Tui Halamaka played 432 snaps. He's definitely going to see some time on the field. He was the most efficient pass rusher on the team, 26 quarterback pressures. Josh Burnham's a former 4-star. He played 467 snaps. Bryce Young is a former 4-star, 374 snaps. Both of them were above average pass rushers, 17 and 13 pressures apiece. 4-star Boubacar Traore got hurt last year. He's back. 4-star Logan Thomas is back. I mean, you've got 6 edge rushers that you could plug and play here, and 4 of them have over 370 snaps of experience. Inside's a little more questionable. You lose Howard Cross, Riley Mills. Both of them were elite. Both of them got injured. So Donovan Heinisch, he played 434 snaps. Gabriel Rubio, he played 306. So honestly, your injuries on this unit are working in your favor yet again. Heinisch was a shockingly good interior pass rusher. The guy had 19 pressures from interior alignments. Shocking, but very good. And Rubio, he's 320 pounds. And it should be no surprise at that size. Elite stuff, run stuffing metrics. It's not the deepest unit because of the losses to Cross and Mills, but they did add a Louisville transfer, Jared Dawson. He had a strong 2024. They do have a couple former 4-stars, Jason Onye, Brennan Vernon, Christopher Burgess. That rounds out depth. So it's another strong unit. Linebackers loaded. I mean, 4 players with at least 340 snaps. Your projected starters are both elite recruits in Jalen Sneed and Drake Bowen. They played 433 and 615 snaps. The only real question I have between the two is Sneed was a bit of a liability in coverage, but Drake Bowen, good in coverage, tackling, pass rushing, whatever you asked him to do, he was an absolute monster. And then you have a couple 4-stars that played as well. Jaden Osbury had 438 snaps. Kingston Viliamu Asa played 343. He moonlighted as an edge rusher too, but now Viliamu Asa's playing full-time linebacker. And man, he has been so good. He was kind of the star defensively of the spring game. I truly don't know how you keep all these guys off the field, which is why I'm a little worried about the spring window for Notre Dame. They have some of the best culture in the country, so perhaps they can retain them all. But man, this linebacker unit is loaded. They're basically returning everyone from last year with the added bonus of depth. We saw in the beginning, their depth retention has been insane. Defensive back, I have a little bit more of a question here, but another unit that was injury-riddled last year. You even had some players depart midseason for the transfer portal. So your losses include Xavier Watts, Jordan Clark, Ron Hurd, and Ben Morrison. Ben Morrison barely played, but he was one of the better units on the field. This has allowed you to cultivate a lot of depth. You have 2 starting corners back, Christian Gray, Leonard Moore. Moore was the single best defender on the entire team. He essentially erased the side of the field. He only allowed 293 yards in coverage all season, 46.5% completion percentage. Now, opposite him, Christian Gray was the weakest link in coverage, but Gray still comes from an elite recruiting pedigree. And now we have a lot of experience with him. And even despite some of the coverage lapses at time, you still get a well above average grade with Christian Gray. Unfortunately, you can do a lot of things to mask him because of some of the strengths you have across your defense. Nickel, I'm not sure who's going to play this position, but I think the favorite is probably Devontae Smith from Alabama. He's been injured a ton throughout his career, and he was injured a bit last year, but he did get up 420 snaps of above average play. Safety, at least one position we know, Aiden Schuler, 768 snaps last year as a freshman, only allowed 258 yards in coverage. Just another, you weren't expecting Schuler to be as good as he was as a freshman. I honestly can't even believe it's still talking about it. The second safety spot, I'm tentatively giving the spot to Jalen Stroman. He only played one game last year because of injury. He's still out for the spring. But this guy, I believe he's been in college since 2019. He has a lot of experience. It's just the injuries have piled up for him, so we're not entirely sure what we're going to get. But like most positions, you have quality depth. They have an incoming 5-star in Dallas Golden. You have 4 stars, Tay Johnson, Ben Minich, Jaden Blair, Mark Zachary are all still with the team. And then they've actually given a lot of play to some 3-stars like Chance Tucker, Carson Hobbs, and Kennedy Urlacher have all played in spots so far for Notre Dame throughout the last 2 years. Special teams, they were awesome on special teams last year. I have some questions. You lose Jeter at kicker, so now we're moving to a North Carolina transfer and Noah Burnett. He's been up and down. Only missed 2 extra points in his career out of 144, but he's shaky from distance. He's 12 of 18 from 30 plus. That's 30 to 39. 6 of 19 from 40 to 49 yards, and 2 of 5 on 50 plus. So I'm not really entirely sure what we're going to get out of the kicker position. I think he's slightly above average, but it's not anything you feel super good about, at least so far. Getting to Notre Dame's schedule, of course, the independent schedule adds some nuance to things, and that starts right away with a week 2 bye. Yeah, I don't really know what to say about this. Because you play independent schedules, you get some weird stuff here. They start right away with a trip to Miami, about as hard of a game as you could draw up for this team. Week 3, technically game 2, is against Texas A&M, another brutal opponent. Those are the 2 toughest opponents all year. So breaking in a new quarterback against Miami and Texas A&M is definitely not the way you want to start the season, but they're going to be thrown to the fire early. Fortunately, Notre Dame is going to have some chance to redeem themselves optically if things go poorly. If things go well, there's no worry. But then you go to Purdue at Arkansas is a semi-difficult game. They're at the bottom of the SEC. Boise State lost their best player. NC State's a middling ACC team. USC, I'm not sure what they're going to give you. Then finally, they get to their second bye in week 9. And the latter half of the season, Boston College, Navy, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Stanford. 2 biggest challenges, probably home against Syracuse, away at Pittsburgh. I mean, there's a lot of paths to at least 10 wins here. And if you get 10 wins, especially like worst case scenario, you're 0-2 against the 2 best teams on your schedule. Then you run table 10-2. I have a hard time seeing Notre Dame miss the playoff in that scenario. And I don't think this team is the roster to lose more than 3 games. I think the ceiling is honestly undefeated with how good the roster is, and potentially you could be looking at a 10-2 floor for this team. They should be back in the playoff this year as long as things don't go horrifically wrong. And again, there's a lot to be decided with the transfer portal and stuff yet. But let's see how this team shakes out against some of the others we've done so far. I'll pull you back up to our tools. I have most of the SEC done so far. The plan is honestly to release this as soon as the transfer portal slows down after a few days, so you guys can have access to this if you're in the Discord. But right now, Notre Dame, we have them currently 63.3. When you look at where we have the power rankings, that would slot in just behind Texas A&M among teams that we have fully completed so far on the unit. So an awesome Notre Dame team. We'll see how they withstand the portal. That's my biggest concern right now. But ultimately, this team has a lot going for them. Again, if you have feedback, please leave it below. If you have a request, that as well. Otherwise, we'll be back tomorrow with Clemson, I believe, is the next on the list. I forgot. I'll just double check. Anyway, thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time.